Hello, 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 and welcome to a lovely episode of Potstilled Live. Welcome to my lovely guest, Ms.Stephanie Shen. Good evening.
Hello.
How are you doing, Stephanie?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Fresh off Instagram Live, I believe. So thanks for being with us.
No props. I'm always excited to hop between different things.
Exactly, jumping between different different ends. So what's going on? What part of the world are we finding you in this evening?
Oh, I'm in Dublin. So due to the coronavirus, unfortunately, all my travel has been grounded. So I am I'm settled here for a while, and I am drinking a delicious little whiskey. Are we talking about it? Is this what we're going to talk about?
We can talk about it. Anything you want at this point.
Yeah, so I mean, today I have had the opportunity to finally try this, which is delicious. So it's Currach, it's a single malt, and for those of you who may know me, I might have a mild obsession with seaweed. So if you don't know me, now you know one weird fact about me. I really like seaweed. So the fact that this was finished off in a barrel that was charred with some dried Irish seaweed is very exciting. So I'm a little bit excitable right now because this might not be my first glass of whiskey.
You hadn't had the opportunity to try this before it was dropped to your door, by the way, for the show, right?
No, I didn't. Okay, so I have to admit I've been pretty bad at keeping up to date with buying of whiskey because I had to limit it. I also just recently got a vinyl player, so I feel like I kind of diverted my whiskey funds into buying vinyls. So that will definitely readdress stuff and rebalance, but I've been falling behind a little.
It's an expensive pastime.
They're both very expensive pastimes.
Yeah, so I have previously had a bit of a vinyl obsession, but I suppose thankfully in some ways and not thankfully in others, I have no vinyl player in my current apartment. But I am delighted that I suppose at this point we'll be able to divert some of my vinyl fund back to whiskey. Now I'm sure not that my collection needs bumping up, but yeah. So as we were saying, hang on, we'll click through some banners here, but the show is sponsored by the Currach single malt kombu seaweed cask Irish whiskey, to give it its full name. Comes from the guys at Origin Spirits, who are known for Killowen single malt vodka and peated vodka, or peated cask vodka, should I say. And then also Ornabrack gin, which is also single malt gin. So this is, if they were going to do whiskey, they weren't going to do something generic, that's for sure. So seaweed cask Irish whiskey, they literally burn and char a virgin oak barrel with kombu seaweed from County Clare, which I think is pretty wild and pretty cool. And what do you think of it? I know you said you hadn't had the opportunity to try it before today.
Yeah, so I was very excited, and I was not disappointed. I'm not gonna lie. I think the nose is amazing on it. It's definitely much sweeter on the nose than I thought it was going to be. Because obviously, when you imagine seaweed, you kind of imagine, a lot of sea salt and a lot of kind of umami, which is definitely the key word here. But I definitely found that on the nose, it was a little bit sweeter than I had imagined. And there's so much citrus in it. So there's like sweet and there's citrus, and then it's kind of like in the background, then you get that lovely seaweed note. So I'm definitely a fan. And it also tastes delicious. I mean, I'm always happy when something is a little bit higher in percentage. So it's 46% non-chill filtered. I'm a happy girl.
Yeah, I find this really chocolatey. Like, and almost like dry, like cacao powder, like, rather than like a chocolate bar, like that kind of chocolatiness. I will just take a moment. You can't see this, and no one else out there can see this, but we do have a guest coming on, and I can see him, and he's currently playing with a cat and a piece of stick, and he's just kind of flicking around. I've embarrassed him now. He's taking out the cat.
I want the cat.
Yeah, we want the cat. We'll
Last
come back to that in a
surprise moment. Guest.
Exactly. But yeah, we will be sipping on this throughout the show. So if anyone has any questions along the way about the Currach kombu seaweed cask, do ask, because we're going to be imbibing and talking about it a little bit later on as well. But it is absolutely fantastic. It's super unique. It almost has a slight, I I don't know, kind of a herbal note at the very end.
Yeah.
But like you said, it is a really nice sweetness to it.
I have to say, like, it definitely has one of the most interesting noses that I've come across in a while, where it evolves a lot just on the nose. I think it's pretty punchy.
Well, when I first got to try this, I wrote an article about it and basically called it, so it's a whiskey unlike anything you've ever tried. And I think that kind of is a testament in the glass. I can't, because it's not peated. Like, you know what I mean? If you're thinking vegetable, you could think the peated direction, but it's not that. But it's also not it's not typical of Irish whiskey. But yeah, it's kind of a fun combination of kind of all roundness. Stephen Randall's from Origin Spirits and Currach, so he's delighted that we're enjoying. So Stephen, I do hope that if people have questions as we go through the show, that you will be able to jump in and help if we don't have the answers. A few people joined in. Michael Cully said hello a little bit earlier on. He's up in Meath. Then we have Jeff Humphreys from Austin, Minnesota, drinking water because it's probably the middle of his workday. In Central Time. I don't know, it's 6 hours back, 2 in the afternoon. Yeah. Eric back again, a regular at this point, saying hi from Belgium. And he's drinking the PX 10-year-old from Dunville's, which is just an absolute whiskey. So no one has a complaint there. And you notice his I think every guest mentions his profile picture is himself and John Teeling in the Teeling Distillery. Oh, Darren Green dropping in, saying hi from Waterford. I'm looking forward to dropping down to the pub, Darren, when the world rights itself back up. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. But probably, I suppose, a good point to introduce our first guest of the show. It is Mr. Brendan Carty from Killowen. I will preface before we bring him on. Obviously, one of the coolest distilleries, I think, in the country, up in the Mourne Mountains. And obviously has been, I want to get his take kind of on how coronavirus and COVID has affected the indie distillers. So without speaking for him too much, welcome Brendan to the show. How are you doing, Brendan?
Hey, how you going, Matt? Good to see you.
Not too bad at all.
Happy days.
Stephanie, Brendan, Stephanie, what's going on?
Stephanie, thanks very much now for having me on. It's great to hear you.
So yeah, basically, I wanted to have you on. We all, there's the cat.
Yes!
The star of the show.
There's my scale ruler.
Yeah, we have no further questions, Brendan. We just wanted to see the cat.
Goodbye. No, we spoke previously off camera, Brendan, about you kind of ended up with kind of a unique COVID recipe or mash bill. And I was kind of hoping that you might be able to kind of run us through, I suppose, A, how that came about, and B, what are you distilling these days?
Yeah, it was pretty funny. At the time, whenever the COVID started to happen, and there was a bit of a delay in supply, and we were short-staffed ourselves. Everybody was sent home, and the whole thing was just disrupted, and we couldn't get any stock in, and we needed to get our mixed mash bills going again. So we just looked in the container and looked at what we had, and we had a good bit of malted oats that we got from Craftsman Malt Co. that ultimately came through Loughran's Malt, and they were oats that would have been grown in County Down, but then moved probably about 200 yards up the road and malted in County Armagh. So it's a bit of a sore subject, but to us, they're still County Down oats. And, so we were able to use those. And so we basically doubled our oat yield inside our mash bill. And we're calling it the COVID mash right now, which doesn't sound very appetizing, but it certainly was delicious. We noticed that the hearts had moved much later, probably about 3% later in total, whenever we were taking them. I don't know why. It's just something that an increase in oats does. A lot more pear drops at the start, but a far more solid mash bill, and all that spiciness is still there. There's just a lot more complexity with the oats, and it just reinforces that whole point of increasing the other 5% to being much more in line with what was traditionally correct in Potstilled whiskey. It's delicious pot still. It's much better than doing it otherwise. But yeah. That was
So
one of them. So I suppose
what did the
one
mash
has to-
bill become? What were you subbing out and subbing in for the oats?
we took out malt basically. So our malt content there dropped down to about 42%, and we increased it to about 30%. So that was the oats alone, but we still have our rye, our unmalted barley, and our wheat in there as well. So I might actually, just thinking now that I'm talking, I might bottle it up and stick it into the case for the Belfast Whiskey Week so people can get a taste of it.
Oh,
So, why not? People
Why
deserve
not?
these things,
You're gonna have quite a showing at the Belfast Whiskey Week, I believe.
Yeah, we actually did. We threw everything at it, including the kitchen sink. Just why not? Just we've shown our hand to everybody. I think everything we've got, we're going to try and put in there. Just pretty much everything. Some stuff that's middle aged, and it's halfway between. So it's really interesting to see where it is. It's a snapshot, and not only that, everything's going in at a high percentage, just so that people can taste it themselves and even dilute it down. And there's a couple of good surprises in there as well. A lot of quite experimental stuff, but so just can't wait. And we sold out a couple of times.
yeah,
Thankfully, Belfast Whiskey Week has been
tickets
great.
for stuff is all sold out. I
Yeah,
don't know.
so then we ended
amazing.
up doing a specialty one, Stephanie, which was brilliant, and I think it's gone now as well. It was a much smaller one, but what's Jamie saying? This is now a record. But yeah, maybe I can't stop talking about Belfast Whiskey Week. It's just been the 2020 has been so crap up until now, and then we've got this big light,
Yeah.
and everybody's happy again.
Yeah, it's funny you said a lot of going in good percentages. In my work, we were submitting into Belfast Whiskey Week as well. I know Paul Kane was pushing me to anything that could be put to cast strength as cast strength. So just whatever it was, just cast strength. What people want. So it's good to hear Europe there as well.
Yeah, but you've got some lovely spirit down there in Bowen as well, so it's good that people can taste it then, the cast strength, and get the most out of it. Bit of a killer as far as Judy's concerned, but
yeah, exactly. But so I suppose did distilling in such a kind of a confined space, or even just getting deliveries of normal things like even the gas for the burners, did that become quite difficult during COVID? Or
luckily we had just enough. What did happen is we forgot to pay for the gas, so it was a bit of a fight with the gas company. And they're actually flow gas. They're not too far from you, Matt, so you might want to go around and have a word with them and draw out of there. But I think they're falling out with us. We might end up using coal or something in the future. But oh dear, luckily the prices are starting to come down now. So yeah, but I think that was the main issue, was the delivery of the malt was disrupted for a short period, and we already started that mash bill, so we thought we would keep it going. But hopefully we start to get things back to normal now. We're not at full operational hours. We're not at full staff. There's only 2 of us instead of 3. So we're only operating on 2/3, And then I suppose the 2 Stacks crowd are in taking over the distillery as well at the moment, which is good fun.
Well, you might want to explain the 2 Stacks, Liam and Shane kind of background there and what they're doing by taking over the distillery.
Yeah, so those guys are, they're working on something very special there. They're working on an independent bottling brand that's, it follows the same integrity that Killowen does. To an extent, I suppose they look at really unique, delicious casks. They're putting out very young whiskey, but it's a very not very young. It's 3-4-year-old blend, but it's very complex in the way they've done it. It tastes fantastic for a whiskey of that age, and it just shows you again the skill of blending. Whenever you couple that with really interesting casks, what it can do, and they'll have a brilliant showcase in Belfast Whiskey Week as well. So I'm looking forward to it. But at the minute they're bottling, for the market, which means that we can't do anything, because when it's a bottling day in Killowen, the whole world stops because it's so small.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure your distillery is about the same size as my living room here.
Indeed, I know. So Donal, Liam and Shane are all up there now, but they take themselves home quite early in the day. They're not like the regular Killowen stock. Their day finishes at 5 o'clock, whereas the rest of us tend to work right on through into the night. So
well, those boys are used to working in London. Those London hours, they stop pretty promptly.
It's crazy. There's a little cottage up at the top of the mountain, and that's where they are right now, just supping on beers, looking around over the loch. And yeah, they know how to do it, you know.
Nice.
So you were telling me earlier, we were having a little discussion about actually just grain supplies, and you've got your malted oats. You're saying from the different maltsters in the area, but you also essentially collect your own oats from the thrashing as well, don't you?
Yeah, there's a Killowen thrashing festival every summer in the area, and they basically sow a field of oats, and a lot of different posses of men from different areas around the country get together and have a competition to see who can, it's like the earliest edition of a combine harvester, and see who can make the most bag of oats and bales of straw with it. And at the end, the oats are auctioned off and the straw is auctioned off. These are grown right down, by the seashore as well, and you're getting a lot of that wind and rain coming in off the sea, and the oats, get battered. Sometimes they fall down and bounce up again because oats are quite a hardy plant, and but that their saline environment and the maritime environment definitely has an influence on the oats as well. So the quality of those are fantastic, and we use them. Then they tend to do us for about 3/4 of the year. But unfortunately, then right now we have to purchase. And Craftsman Malt Co. Damien Rafferty is making these fantastic malted oats himself. They're not peated like the ones that we would do, but they're malted and they're lovely. So he's supplying those in, and the character that they have. It's funny. Killowen's never going to be consistent. It's always going to be different, and I think that's going to be the beauty of our whiskey going forward. But those different accents are definitely coming through in the spirit, and it's very obvious. As long as they're quality oats, it's good. Even sometimes we're using non-malted oats as well, which add their own flavour. But so I suppose we just get them wherever we can. That's the thing.
Well,
we participate in the competition.
Sorry?
Do you participate in the competition? Like, are
no,
you there?
Wouldn't have the skill. Well, I wouldn't even be allowed in. These guys are, generations doing it, and they deserve to be there. But real proper good farmers. But we definitely go and watch. It's an amazing festival, and it's all in aid of the local hospice. Everything, all the stalls and all of the proceeds and the prizes.
And you pick up oats, then they thrash them and you pick them up.
Yeah, exactly. We do all the hard work, though. But it's funny, we done a 70% oat whiskey as well then for the hospice. So we laid down that cask. It was very painstaking work because you don't get a lot of yield out of oats.
Yeah.
So we were really trying then to maximise that. So what we done was just made this lovely whiskey, and a small amount of it we took a firkin, and we also give a firkin then to the local hospice. So we're going to do what we can. I don't believe in high-priced whiskey and hyperinflating whiskey, but this one firkin I'm going to hyperinflate just to get as much money as possible for the local hospice. It's going to be brilliant. I can't wait. And took a little sample out of it there, and my God, it's fascinating stuff. We threw in a little bit of rye as well, just to add that bit of spice. And speaking of oats, my biggest influence in whiskey is, I don't know if you're aware of these guys, Belgrove Distillery in Tasmania. They are phenomenal. Their distillery is smaller than mine. Peter's he's a genius at what he does. And he's a big influence, and he came over to visit us as well. And he's actually taken part in the Belfast Whiskey Week as well. It's going to be some festival. So what he's sending over is an oat whiskey.
Nice.
So he's going to be 4, but that hasn't been announced yet. So maybe I've shouted about that too soon. Paul,
I've got a log on here.
Yeah.
Rewind that, can you? It's just live.
Just edit that bit out. It's fine. It's fine. Everyone immediately going on to Belfast Whiskey Week.
Oh dear.
So when you're talking about your peating and malting your own oats, you literally have a little shed out the back. And I know from the comments that people have been watching the last few weeks, you did mention once that the shed has caught fire on once or twice.
Yeah, this isn't live, is it? We can. No, there's never been any fire at the distillery. Health and safety is paramount. It's essential. We smoke our own oats in a very sensible manner. But yeah, turf is a slow burner. But when you put a lot of turf on, sometimes it can go on fire. But it's fantastic. We've got this little shed, and we've got these wooden crates with just with chicken wire and then like wire mesh on top of that again, and the oats just sit on top of it, and it just allows all that lovely peat smoke to come up through. And you'll notice there's different types of peat, peat from the Mournes, and then compared to peat from Donegal, which is much more sweeter and aromatic as well. So yeah, we're smoking as much as we can on site. We done a cask for the Irish Whiskey Society, and it had a higher smoked content from what we done ourselves, which was pretty interesting.
Jamie Cotter dropping in from Belfast Whiskey Week saying that definitely wasn't supposed to be announced yet.
Well, but we all know now. We all know now.
It's an exclusive. You're beautiful exclusive. You might as well just tell us what whiskey you're releasing at the festival now.
Oh no! And we're also about to release our own bonded experimental series again, the next edition. Trying to keep up that quality and integrity and a unique flavour. So this one, we were waiting now for about 5 weeks on the Hessian bags to arrive, because they're made ethically, with fair trade, fair wages, environmentally friendly, and all of that. And because of that, they keep making excuses, which is fair enough. So we were expecting them this week, and we rang them, and they said that the team are only starting to stitch them together now. And it's like, right, okay. So we're just going to release our bottles without that. So maybe we'll throw a few different places, and they can collect them.
So this is I suppose the last release, the tequila edition.
Yeah.
So you'll be.
It's lovely. I think I've drank all mine. It was my favorite. I got another, but yeah, I think it's my favorite so far. I don't know why. I think it adds a little bit. There's a few more earthy notes in there, and a slight bit more balance in terms of there's a bit more savory note in there. I know it's still very sweet, but more so than the others. So we're just trying to keep them all very different. It's amazing what you can do with casks. You're talking about the Currach there as well. Lovely seaweed influence there as well. The umami, chocolatey notes, it's amazing what you can do with casks.
I'm really blown away by, if nothing else, the chocolate notes, like the mouth coatingness, like the kind of solidity in there as well. Just from burning the seaweed in the cask and charring the cask. And the lads were saying that the different type, like you were saying, with the different types of peat, there's a different flavor. The lads in Origin Spirits were saying that the different types of seaweed actually has a different flavor in the cask as well. And they've got, I think, 4 different types of seaweed casks kind of experimentally maturing away in the background.
Very good.
Kind of a different style of terroir.
Are they burning different seaweed in the casks every time, or just more of it or less of it?
Well, they're taking virgin casks, and then as far as I understand, each cask is charred once with a type of seaweed, but they're taking different ones. Yeah.
So I was actually talking to Stephen about this just before we came on the call, and it takes 35 minutes to char each barrel, because they take, I think it's 0.5 kilo bundles of dried seaweed, and initially what they did was they just popped it into the cask, but then they found that the bottom of the cask was charring and it wasn't giving a uniform char. So what they started to do was they put it on its side, and so they put in a 0.5 kilo bundle of dried seaweed, and then they use that to char it, and then they kind of slowly turn it, then they take it out and put in a new batch, and they do that 6 times. So it is a very specific hand charred event, which is really exciting.
And then they're swapping out what seaweed they're using is where they're going with that, and I think they're keeping it under their hats a little bit as to whether or not they'll release anything past the kombu seaweed. But it's very interesting. It's very cool, and unsurprisingly aimed as export markets, very east. So it's, in markets that are familiar with seaweed, which we had a Fanon O'Connor. Sorry?
Asia, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. That's great.
So there, I know a good amount of the first releases are going towards, I think, Japan and China, as well as into Russia. But it was funny because when we were speaking to Fanon there the last day on the show, he was explaining kind of after the camera stopped rolling that the Irish diet pre-colonial times had kind of 2 defining features. One, we apparently over-indexed on how much dairy we ate compared to the rest of the world. Apparently, we just put dairy in fucking everything. And And then the other thing was we had a huge amount of seaweed in our diet. That basically was lost, as he put it. The two things that ruined the Irish diet for potatoes and colonialism.
Indeed. Probably healthy. No iodine deficiencies then, anyway. Yeah, no. Lovely stuff.
Exactly. So we've had some terroir, we've had some peatwar, and now some seawar. There you go.
Well done, Nick.
So I suppose if we're going to have a parting word from Killowen, do you want to give people kind of a preview if they're lucky enough to have been signed up to Killowen at Belfast Whisky Week, what they should expect, or where to find you guys if they haven't signed up?
Yeah, we basically, it's all sold out, I'm afraid, but there's still some amazing stuff going at Belfast Whisky Week. The Currach Distillery are releasing a whiskey at it. Dingle are releasing a whiskey at it. Bushmills are at it. There's some distilleries that are there. Any distilleries that have missed out. What were you thinking? It's fantastic that Ireland's getting this whiskey festival. People usually have to go to Scotland, to get this, but now, right now, you don't even have to travel an hour or two up the road. You can just get it direct to your door. It's phenomenal, and it's in Ireland, and everybody in the world's going mad for it. You get so many Germans and Americans, so many people from the north and the south, and people from Scotland and England. There's English distilleries, which some very good English distilleries out there as well, that are all taking part, and some new Scottish distilleries as well. So I think it's great to see, and it's going to be a massive hive of innovation, and I can't wait. It's the sort of thing that, remember when you were a wee lad or a child and used to keep you awake on Christmas Eve thinking about Santa? Well, that's the sort of way I feel right now. It's going to be great.
Well, I think it's going to be a serious festival, and we'll be talking about it a little bit later on as well. But Brendan, at this point, I'm going to say Garilla Magath, and thanks for coming on.
No, but you can wait me up. Slán.
So we have. Well, that was pretty cool. To jump back to Currach for a second, Stephen has dropped back in to say as a Postilled exclusive, which is 2 exclusives in one show. There'll be 2 more seaweed varieties of the Currach sometime in the next year. One from the red seaweed family and one from the green seaweed family. So not giving away too much there, but delighted to know that there'll be more additions to come along. And certainly kind of a family range to be able to taste through, which is quite cool. And it'd be very cool to see them as kind of like a horizontal tasting to try to kind of find your way through them.
Definitely. I'm just excited about more seaweed. Seaweed should be everywhere. I think it's crazy that it was a part of our diet, and like we live on an island, and like how much fish do we consume? Like seaweed is something that's, I think, like I actually know nothing about growing seaweed, but I figure because it's everywhere, it's probably pretty easy to grow. But we live on an island. We should have way more seaweed in our lives.
Absolutely. Exactly. And that's the thing I always found funny about going to the States. The Irish pub and Irish food is such a staple everywhere, and it's pretty much the same, like 12 dishes repeated. And one of the things I find hilarious is there's not a lick of seafood in it anywhere, which is definitely the kind of the part of the Irish diet they've missed. There's no seafood cheddars or fish pies. There's no, okay, you get fish and chips, but that's not exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was like, but like, do you know if it's really fish? What kind of fish is it? Questionable.
Exactly. And quite cool. Jeff Spearinson, he bought tickets to Killowen, and Paul is sending it to him in Panama. Panama City, Panama, not even Panama City, Florida, the real Panama City. So that is quite cool that Killowen is going all the way from the Mourns into Panama City. I can still see Brendan backstage, and he looks delighted with that. So Jeff, you've made his day. So I think there's a few more comments from Jamie trying to drop hints at a few things for Belfast Whisky Week, but I'll let people check those out in the comments because we do have a lot to kind of motor through as we're going along. One of the things we wanted to bring up was the Teeling Distillery's 5th birthday, which is quite cool. I suppose announced recently that the anniversary happened just a few days ago. There were some seriously cool stats coming out of them.
Oh yeah, I thought it was crazy. That one image they have where they have like 500,000 people came to visit, and then I'm really bad with numbers, but it was very exciting.
Yeah, 500,000 visitors, 200,000 bottles sold in the distillery gift shop, which, first of all, just that's pretty amazing. Anyway, what was it? 25,000 barrels filled. So looking about 5,000 barrels a year, which is pretty hefty. I think it was like 3 million liters of pure alcohol distilled. And one stat I found very specific in its wording was 8,000 tons of barley milled, which I just love that it was just barley milled. We didn't do anything with it. We just milled it. Sold it to the bakers. Obviously went to make whiskey. I just thought that was a fantastic, very specific.
Local bakeries. We don't know.
Exactly. I did invite Rob Colwell, the Teeling Global Ambassador, on the show this evening. But I then for a little kind of op-ed like Brendan would have come on for. But I did find out that it was his birthday, and he was having a birthday dinners pretty much right now, so he couldn't join us. But I mean, so Steph, you've worked in the industry as well for this was the bar industry rather than the whiskey industry for quite a while. I remember selling Teeling in 2014 in Vancouver, Canada, when it was a brand rather than a distillery. And I remember we used to sell loads of it because it was one of the few whiskeys that it was the small batch pretty much only at that point. And it was it basically it was one of the few that was in rum cask. So it was a kind of a factor. Yeah.
I mean, as a bartender, it was very, very exciting. So like I'm obviously I work with Dead Rabbits. I'm the global brand ambassador, and there's been a lot of, I mean, almost every interview you kind of end up talking about your background, blah blah blah. But one of the things I always focus on is the fact that when I was working as a bartender, I always wanted to champion Irish products. And when I first started bartending, which was about 10 years ago, what I had to champion was Guinness, Jameson, and Bushmills, and that was kind of it. So one of the big things about Teelings was that it was finally, there was a product that we could stand behind and say, oh my God, this is made, and it's new, and it's exciting, and it's currently being made in Dublin, and it hadn't had that kind of over marketed vibe. And like Kevin Hurley was the first global brand ambassador, and Kevin Hurley used to be the general manager for the liquor rooms, which would have been probably at the forefront of the cocktail revolution in Dublin and possibly in Ireland at that time. And so when he joined, it became this symbol for bartenders who just wanted to have something that they were able to, like full-heartedly stand behind. And it was I remember, like, I actually worked at the opening for the Teelings distillery. I was one of the bartenders that worked at the opening of the distillery, and it was just like I was one of the first people to write my name on the wall. At one stage at the end of the shift, I dropped to one knee, and Kevin Hurley like sort of kind of knighted me and gave me a Teelings pin. Like, it was incredible. It was so good, and it was such a beautiful brand for bartenders to kind of rally behind. And we finally had a product that we were able to be like, yes, this is ours, and it hasn't been, like heavily marketed or Americanized, or because I mean, the brands that already existed were great, but they were obviously predominantly pushed for export. So this was something that was like, it was independent, it was small, it was unique, it was very Irish. And then you had Kevin Hurley as the global brand ambassador, who just kind of brought all of the bartenders on board. It was very exciting. So it's beautiful to see that it's 5 years old and it's doing really well.
It is, and it's funny in my head. It seems so much older than 5 years at this point. Like, but one of the things I always find amazing about Teeling is, in the whiskey industry, you talk about kind of two things when you're talking about like your market share. Because you've got the share of market, which is just sales volume, and then you also have a thing called share of mind, which is kind of how relevant or how quickly do consumers recognize your brand. And regardless of where Teeling sit in the share of market, they have to be like number 2 at this point, Irish whiskey in share of mind. Like, if you go anywhere in Dublin, you'd swear there's no other distillery in the country. Like Teeling, I mean, if you go abroad, Berlin Bar Convention, one of the biggest stands is Teeling. Athens Bar Show, exactly the same thing. Even regional events, if I'm in the Netherlands, Teeling has one of the coolest, biggest stands, and B, they have these paddy caps with Teeling in the back of them. There's like 700 like Dutch people coming up to you, showing you this paddy cap they just got. So like they are present always, which is such a cool thing to be able to see. And I think I read in one of the press releases that there's kind of a new branded bottle coming as well. So it's a lot of exciting things coming up. A couple of single casks going to the States. Obviously, they just released the 28-year-old. So, I mean, they're still moving, still innovating. And Rob was talking just a while ago on the podcast, Postilled Radio. And he was talking that they've got some very cool, unique finishes coming along the way. And their own distilled peated single malt as well.
Yeah.
Which I was actually completely coincidentally, I was in the distillery the day they started distilling that back in whatever year it was, 2017, 2016, for an entirely different release. I think it was like the Galway Hooker 200 Fathoms, their first kind of like stout cask. And the distillery was just like this warm, peated, chocolatey smell through the whole distillery. It was very interesting. But yeah, and then we also have a few people dropping back in to say hi. Sergius from Irish Whiskey Magazine dropping in to say hi. We will be talking a little bit in the next part about, well, actually, you know what? I suppose it's probably a good moment to kind of swap gears. Because one of the things we do want to talk about is the new appointments in Midleton. Obviously, a big couple of weeks in Midleton. And if anyone hasn't or wants to kind of get an inside scoop of this, Sergius in Irish Whiskey Magazine has an interview with, I suppose, former Master of Maturation, now Master of Maturation and ampersand Master of Distillation, Kevin O'Gorman, which I listened to this morning. Super cool interview. So do check that out. You were on with Serge last week, was it?
Yeah. Oh, geez. I think it was last week. Time has lost all meaning since the lockdown. But we kind of did a double whammy. So I tend to do like an Ask Me Anything series where I got to ask Serge all of the questions. But yeah, I was also on the word. I keep saying words with whiskey because I love alliteration. But I know now, Serge, it is words on whiskey. But yeah, so Serge is fantastic. I'm a very big Serge fan. I think he's wonderful, and he's such a genuine human being, and he's just focused and professional, but also full of heart, and he's just great. So yeah, that was.
If anyone doesn't know the Irish Whiskey Magazine, an excellently produced magazine, all dedicated to Irish whiskey, and Brendan Cardy from Backstage, who's still hanging out. Wants to know, Serge, when the next magazine issue is out. Whoop, I just knocked over all my Irish Whiskey magazines sitting here in the bookshelf, including leaned up against a bottle of Manual Love, and I just knocked all of it over. Live podcasting. But yeah, Serge, if you're still watching along, do let us know in the comments when we can expect the next magazine out. Obviously, we have some very interested people. But yes, to jump back to Midleton for a moment. Obviously, we spoke last time about the kind of shock departure of Brian Nation, who's going to Minnesota. And I see Jeff Humphreys who's living in Austin, Minnesota at the moment, commenting at this point. And Brian is moving up to Minnesota to work in kind of a, I suppose, for better words, Irish style distillery in Minnesota, making some pot still and single malts up there. So Kevin O'Gorman was kind of, I suppose, dual knighted into the position of Master Distiller, Master Maturation, which is great because as the kind of the Master Maturation, you're looking at forecasting and what distillate you need and what kind of wood. So I suppose now there's one step removed in that process for him, which is quite cool. But then we had the kind of announcement this week that Catherine Condon has been appointed distiller, direct report to Kevin O'Gorman. So she is the kind of day-to-day operations person for all pot and column distillations, which is just wildly cool. And she came through the grad program, which is, I mean, Midleton's kind of funny like that. Like you think of this giant organization, people kind of sideways themselves in. But Brian Nation, I think, started on site as an engineer. Kevin O'Gorman said he came from, I was listening to Serge's show. He said he came from Gilbey's and then entered as a distillery operative, I believe, or a distiller. I don't want to demote his stature there, and then worked his way up very much like Brian Nation. And exactly with Catherine, she started as a graduate program distiller, then was in the innovation hub in the micro distillery, and now is taking over, I suppose, day-to-day distillation responsibilities, which is superly wildly cool. Like what an opportunity for her, and obviously well earned. Like they're not Middleton being one of the kind of the largest, well, it is the largest distillery in the country, but one of the largest kind of pot distillation distilleries in the world. That's a seriously cool accolade to put on the CV.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I mean, it's kind of interesting to see the landscape of Irish whiskey in the past couple of years, because obviously we went from so few to so many so quickly. And I've always been kind of fascinated with, I mean, you know, my background is in bartending. And when I first started 10 years ago, there was very few female bartenders. And this kind of became like a bit of a running theme where it was like, where are all the girls at? So it's been really, really nice to see that there is a lot more females coming forward. And, you know, I mean, like if you look at the master distiller for Roanco, that's also a female. You've got Laura Hemme in there, and then you've got Louise McGain. Like there's a lot more females that are coming up, and I think it's very exciting, because on one hand you've got all of these women coming in, but I feel like they kind of came in through an independent route, whereas when we finally have a distiller that's coming on board for Middleton, which is essentially like the heartbeat of Irish whiskey, I think that that's a very strong indication that times are changing. And you know, I mean, I also am a massive fan personally, because she was very heavily involved in Method and Madness, which is one of my favorite families of whiskey. So I'm very excited to see what happens, because this feels like a little bit of a refresh, possibly. You know, when you've got a new master head distiller and you've got a new person distilling that was working on these kind of crazy side projects that they had in the micro distillery. I think it's going to be a very exciting next couple of years to see what Middleton are producing. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, like you said, and actually I pulled up a comment there from Brendan, you know, very much the female representation in the industry, which is great. And it's also funny because I was kind of always told as I was younger that women always had better sense of taste anyway. So for well, how true or not that is, it's funny because we're seeing a lot of women in either kind of championing or moving into blending roles. Like Helen Mulholland in Bushmills has been kind of a key. She's one of the key players up in Bushmills and has been for a number of years. Then Alex Thomas, who's the head blender of the Sexton up in Bushmills as well. You've got Sarah Dowling, head blender in Cooley Distillery, which is quite cool. And then so I mean, like it's great to see, and like you said in the bartending, you know, where the women at. I remember talking to some US bartenders telling me like it was it I don't know what it was. Within living memory, it was illegal for women in a number of US states to be bartenders.
Well, I'm pretty sure that they only made it legal for women to bartend in Chicago in like the 60s or the 70s. Like it was very, very recent. They had made it illegal for women to work behind the bar because it was deemed that women could essentially use their wily mystical ways to convince men to spend more money on alcohol and thus become drunker. So it was deemed safer to not have women behind the bar in case they used their wily magical powers that women have to get people to drink more.
Yeah. And it's funny because during the Second World War, all the bartenders were women anyway. And then the moment the men came back, they were kind of shoot off. But I mean, in Ireland, we had lounges in bars, and, you know, women weren't allowed in the bar. That's what the lounge was for. You could go in there if you wanted to have your whatever, but you weren't allowed in the bar. And, you know, strangest of scenarios. Back to Brendan's comment earlier asking Sergius when the next issue of Irish Whiskey Magazine is coming out. Mid-July is apparently the answer. So I am very much looking forward to that, to seeing how that goes. And then we have a few other people dropping in, say, I suppose, hi at this point. I I'm gonna put up this comment from Damien. So Damien, living in Connecticut, good Irish lad living in Connecticut, said pub in NYC, because I'm going to asterisk this with, I have not proofed this. I don't know how true or not this is, but it only permitted ladies in the 1970s. I'm only just asterisking it because it has the name of the bar in it, but we can all look it up for ourselves. I don't disagree with that's probably true, but it is an unusual part of history. And actually, just sitting here, I do have all my whiskey books behind me. If anyone has an interest,
my favorite book.
This is one of my favorite whiskey books, Whiskey Women, by Fred Minnick. I actually picked that up in Buffalo Trace a few years ago. I needed a book for the plane, and that is fantastic. It talks about women in Scotch, Irish, and American whiskies, and as well, I'm forgetting her name now, the wife of Takasuru in Japan.
Oh, Jane. It was Jane? I think it was Jane. I could be wrong. Oh, God. I did a whole talk about this like a month ago. I'm so bad with remembering people's names. Oh, Lord. But yes, to get through his wife. What a ledge bag. But also all of the witchcraft. It's one of my favorite books, like whether it be alcohol or general book related. It's so fascinating. There's so many elements of crazy in it. But yeah, I definitely fixated on the witchcraft part because I thought it was badass and hilarious.
Women making booze is witchcraft. I mean, they're taking one element. It's like alchemy. You take one thing and you make it into another. Yeah. Well, not to be too sidetracked altogether, excuse me, we have been talking about a number of different whiskey festivals that are coming up. Before we depart the last comment, Ken McCabe in the airport said the snug was for the women in Ireland, to hide them away, I suppose. So good piece of social, I suppose, commentary at that point. But yes, online whiskey festivals. On the 18th of July, we've Distilled from L Mulligan Whiskey Shop / and grocer and everything else. So the team there, that's going to be quite cool. It's basically a ticket involved, 2 masterclasses, as well as entrance. And I love this. It's an entrance cocktail from 1661. First of all, if anyone hasn't checked out 1661 in Dublin, you need to. It's a destination bar. I am one of my things in the world I'm fascinated by is destination bars. But the 1661 is a destination bar. Very few people just happen across, I suppose, 1661. But when you do happen across it, it's packed always, and it is just beautiful inside. And then basically you get your entrance cocktail. I think there's kind of an entrance talk you can kind of go into as well. And then you get an afternoon and evening masterclass. And there's a load of different Irish brands in there. You've got your Method and Madness in there as well. I think Green Spot, Glendalough, Powers, Red. I'm not going to say Redbreast. I don't know if Redbreast in it. Pierce Lyons are there. Dingle, or not Dingle. Dublin Liberties, as well as Roan Co. are in there as well. And then a number of kind of non-Irish distilleries as well. So it's quite a cool lineup there. And that, I think that's even seeing the kind of multitudes of whiskey festivals that are going on to try to, bring back some of the life to the whiskey fabric in Ireland is quite cool. And then, of course, starting on the 24th of July, just 6 days later, we have the Belfast Whiskey Festival, which we were talking about already. So I don't even know, 30 tastings. I have no idea. I know some brands have kind of booked out entire days, like Bushmills, I think, are doing 3 tastings in a day. And then you've got a little bit of everyone. I know Brendan sold out kind of pretty much everything. I think Brendan opens and 2 Stacks closes, or maybe it's the other way around. But that's quite cool. And a load of different brands there's also actually one cool thing. They're doing, I think, a pre-1970s tasting where they've basically gone out to like auctions and people's private collections and purchased these just fantastic bottles of Irish whiskey. which is very, very cool. Have you signed up for any of them? Because I definitely want to sign up for that Tasmania tasting.
I feel like I need to sign up for a lot more. I missed the Killowen, and then once I saw that Killowen was sold out, I was kind of like, oh well, I guess I've just kind of missed the boat. As I said, I've been pretty head down and just kind of like working away, and then like spending all of my money on vinyl. But I am signed up for the one where it's basically the history of Irish whiskey, and it talks about like aquavitae and then poaching and then single malt, which Chris Hennessy, I believe, is a part of. So I signed up for that one, but I definitely want to sign up for more. But I just think that it's a really, really, really amazing opportunity. And I also think that it's going to be an integral part of how we discuss and or sell whiskey from this point on. I mean, instead of, people having to invest a huge amount of money. So like, for example, we haven't really had a massive amount of whiskey opportunities in Ireland when I first started as a bartender. So the big thing was that everyone would try to like save all of their money and head over to Berlin for BarCon in Berlin. And I think that can be pretty ostracizing for people who want to learn more, but maybe don't have a huge amount of income. So I feel like this is a much more accessible way to kind of get involved in something that is not just limited to Dublin City either, which is another thing.
And I think that was one of the things that that Paul was very insistent on when he first kind of pitched the idea to me, that it's not just like it's obviously not just Dublin, but also not just Belfast. Like he wanted people in the Republic and across the north to be involved. So
beneficial for both sides. It's beneficial for people who want to learn more and be a bartender or just a non-bartender person, but it's also beneficial for much smaller independent brands who do not have the money to be able to afford to spend thousands of euros on a stand at an international convention. I think it's beneficial for both parties, and it's very exciting.
I have an interesting one here that came through Periscope on Twitter. And the question is, do you remember the first whiskey you tried, and what was the whiskey that converted you? I suppose converted being a very kind of personal question, what you're being converted from and to, but I mean, I'm going to pitch it to you because it's actually quite an interesting question.
Yeah. My father is Chinese Malay and my mother is Irish, and my father moved to Ireland when he was 17, met my mother and never went home. So when I was 17, I decided that I was going to go to Malaysia. And my parents were very strict. So my father was a very stereotypical Chinese man where he was, quite strict with what we did. So I didn't really drink, even though I'm Irish. I grew up and all my friends were drinking, but I didn't really. And then I landed in Malaysia and I went a little bit wild. But in Malaysia, it's a very different bar culture. So when you go into a bar, you buy singular bottles. You wouldn't go in and order a whiskey and Coke. You'd order the whole bottle, and then that's your bottle. And like they have stickers where you can mark off how much you've drank, and then every time you go in, you get that bottle. So you could either get a bottle of something or a slab of beer. I tasted beer, and I was like, nope, this is not for me. And instantly was like, I will try anything other than beer. So when I started off drinking, I think it was Johnny Walker Black Label and Shivas 12. So it was always in between those. So I feel like I've been raised in the world of alcohol with a very high baseline. But yeah, so one of the first things I ever drank was Johnny Walker Black Label, and I've pretty much been sold on whiskey ever since.
Right. Okay. And what age have you been at that point?
17.
It's funny. It almost didn't sound like you said 18.
18. I was definitely 18. I forgot it was my 17th birthday before I went. There we go.
Yes.
I did go through a weird cycle. So obviously when I started off at Scotch, I wanted more peatier things. So I kind of went super peaty when it came to Scotch. And then when I came back to Ireland, I was like, oh, I don't really want peat anymore. And I went through this weird cycle where I went from Scotch to bourbon, and then from bourbon to Japanese, and then Japanese back to Irish, and that's when I start bartending. And then I was like, well, this worked out well.
All right, not a bad roundabout way. My first whiskey is a shocking story, because it was prior to me getting into the world of whiskey, which happened in Vancouver in Canada. But yeah, I was diagnosed as celiac when I was like 19. So I was always drinking like really crappy beer. And then basically the doctor was like, "No, the reason you're getting, sleepy and bloated and tired all the time is because you're allergic to like half the things you're eating and drinking." So they were like, "You can't drink beer. So why don't you try like cider, wine, or whiskey?" And I was like, missed the first two, and I was like, "Yeah, let's go drink whiskey." And great. And one of my like best friend in the world at the time still my best friend. But he said to me. He'd obviously completely misunderstood the genesis of, I suppose, Jameson's most famous serve, which is the whiskey, is it Jameson Ginger and Lime? I don't know what happened, but he missed a key point of that drink somewhere along the way. So we thought we were so hard and so cool at the age of 19. We used to drink Jameson lime cordial and water. Because he was like, "This is what people drink, man. Like this is like the cool thing you drink in bar." And bartenders used to think we were like, "Just make it, man." So anyway, and we thought it was awful, but we thought that this was what like people. And I remember I went away and I heard like the phrase for the first time, and I'm like, he missed like the most important like. But we had been drinking this for a while, so that was not what converted me. But working in whiskey at the time after that kind of converted me. And I actually still have about a third left of the first whiskey bottle I ever bought.
What was the first whiskey bottle?
I bought a bottle of Ardbeg Ardbog in Canada. I got it like the great thing about controlled states is sometimes they can transfer you things if they don't have it in your local store. And I got a bottle transferred like 900 kilometers to my store. And then I picked up one of the few that was in the state. But yeah, I still have about a third of the bottle left. And at this point, I bought it 6 years ago. So I don't know how good it is, but it's kind of just a memento on my shelf. And it was 150 Canadian dollars. I think, I don't know, that is like 90 euro maybe. But kind of cool. Then I still, I don't know. I was pretty happy I still have that. But yeah, good question to come in. Then Jamie Cotter dropping back in to say Hinch Whiskey sounds like they'll have a fantastic event. Here's, I suppose, we do have a final point to kind of finish up before we go, but coming in with a second good question, Nick. What is a bottle in your collection you cannot bring yourself to finish, and why?
Okay, so I'm going to preface this by saying that I describe myself as a whiskey dragon. So I really like to buy whiskey, and honestly, it's all under my bed. So my boyfriend would be very upset, but if I'm ever like, "Oh my god, this whiskey's amazing," he has to buy a second bottle so that we can drink the second bottle, because I just have all of these unopened bottles under my bed. So yeah, so to answer your question, all of the whiskey.
Okay, just all of them. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I've some one of my favorite whiskeys is the kind of 1970s screw cap Powers with the kind of black and gold label. That's a whiskey I will always pick up if I find it. And right now, that's probably my longest open bottle apart from the Ardbeg on my shelf, and there's like this much left in the bottle, and I cannot bring myself to finish it. I've never been one for infinity bottles, but I've been thinking about it a little bit more recently. But probably that Power 70s. It's kind of funky. It's kind of different. It's a blend. It's one of their kind of first blends. Yeah. But seriously good whiskey. But I suppose to finish up the kind of the last thing I wanted to bring up, because we're kind of pushing time at this point. Dingle this evening kind of came out of nowhere and changed their kind of their Renboy Strawman logo and kind of their kind of whole branding to the Pride colors for Pride Month. So
that I thought was just super cool to bring out, because a lot of the times brands will let their I don't say let, but a lot of the times they'll leave their employees to have their own personal opinions on things like Pride or Black Lives Matters, and don't make a lot of brand statements themselves. And some do, some don't. It's just dependent on what they decide to do. But I thought it was very cool that Dingle came out this evening with a full suite of Pride. I know, I'm trying to think in my head, I know a few brands previously, not just in Irish whiskey, but like Absolute does their Pride label. Tullamore Dew has kind of very famously, maybe more so famously in the States, supported Pride with kind of figuring the label into just Pride colors without the kind of branding, but it's kind of the iconic bottle shape for some promotions.
I haven't seen it in Ireland.
Sorry?
I haven't seen that Tully label in Ireland.
It was kind of a promotional thing. It was kind of their message rather than an actual bottle, if that makes sense. Okay. So Dave Cummins from the Porterhouse Group and Dingle says the Porterhouse has also come out supporting Pride Month. So that is great news. And they also just brought out a new range of 440ml cans, and I'm a huge fan of 440ml cans. So check those out. And Dave, if you want to make some sours, keep me a case, because I hate hops. But if you want to make any sours, let me know. But yeah, that's just something I thought was quite cool. I'm a very big ally, so I wanted to shout that out. So yeah, anything in particular you want to wrap up on? Any sentiments before I suppose we thank Currach and everyone listening in?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. I didn't realize that there would be more whiskey. I'm very excited for whiskey always. And this is delicious. You should all buy it.
Absolutely. Before we go, I am this evening actually drinking out of these brand new platinum rimmed Tua glasses, and I will be giving away 2 sets of these on the website sometime soon. So keep an eye on the social channels for that. And a very big thanks to Currach. Let me get the name right. Currach Single Malt Kombu Seaweed Cask Irish Whiskey. It says it all there. It's a very long name.
Atlantic Kombu.
Oh, God damn it. It is Atlantic Kombu. This is actually, every time I try this, I enjoy it more and more. I am very much enjoying this. And I think it's very interesting, very unique. And I look forward to trying their next releases. Actually, this bottle was March 2020, so it's quite a new bottle as well. I'm very much enjoying this. I'm assuming yours is likely the same. So thanks to the guys at Origin Spirits. Sorry, I'm reading some of the comments here before we go. Dave Cummins dropping back in to say that a sour is on the list. I'm pretty happy. And actually, just before we go, Jeff Humphreys in Minnesota is asking, is the Atlantic Kombu Cask coming to the States? Now, I know, Stephen, I know you're still listening because you just commented. Could do a quick comment on that, because I know the batch 1 wasn't going to the States. That it was in kind of Ireland, continental Europe, and a little bit of Asia. But I think future batches are going to the States. So I will let him do a little bit of typing if he's still there. If not, do check out the comments of this Facebook Live on Potstill's Facebook for Stephen's answer to that. And to everyone watching, thank you very much. Ms.Stephanie Shen, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I know you had a busy evening. And to everyone watching, thanks guys, and to Brendan. And actually, Brendan, I'll pop Brendan back up for a second. He is you're petting the cat. You made it look crazy now.
I wasn't.
I saw him petting the cat, and I thought I'd bring him back in.
We're all here for the cat.
Exactly. And basically, just to finish off that sentiment, Stephen says that the Kombu Cask will be released in the States in 2021. Thanks, Brendan, to you, Stephanie, to you, and to the guys at Currach Irish Whiskey. So, Carmina Mogat, Slán.